Welcome, everyone. I'm James Shore, and this is the Art of Agile Development Book Club. Today, we are talking about forecasting and roadmaps. It's a topic that a lot of teams struggle with, and I'm very happy to have Todd Little joining us today. Todd Little has been involved in product development for 40 years. He's chairman of Kanban University, past member of the board of directors of the Agile Alliance, and a founder of the big Agile conference series, such as Agile 2022 happening this year. His IEEE Software article, Schedule Estimation and Uncertainty Surrounding the Cone of Uncertainty, was the basis of the date and scope forecasting technique described in the Art of Agile Development. Todd, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Look forward to a fun conversation.
Yeah, I am too. I'm going to go ahead and get things started by reading an excerpt from the Art of Agile Development. As a reminder, the second edition is out now in both ebook and print editions. You can get it from Amazon by visiting jamesshore.com/s/buy-AOAD2, and you can find excerpts and bonus material by visiting jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2. Roadmaps. Our stakeholders know what to expect from us. Ultimately, accountability is about providing good value for your organization's investment. In a perfect world, your business stakeholders will trust your team to do so without close supervision. This is achievable, but it usually takes a year or two of delivering reliably first. In the meantime, your organization is going to want to oversee your team's work. Stakeholder demos help, but managers often want to know more about what you're doing and what to expect. You'll share this information in your roadmap. Agile roadmaps don't have to look like traditional software roadmaps. I've used the term fairly loosely to encompass a variety of ways that teams share information about their progress and plans. Some roadmaps are detailed and to the point for sharing with managers. Others are high-level and glossy for sharing with customers. Agile Governance. The type of roadmap you provide depends on your organization's approach to governance. How does your organization ensure teams are working effectively and moving in the right direction? The classic approach is project-based governance. It involves creating a plan, an estimate of costs, and an estimate of value. The project is funded if the total value sufficiently exceeds the total costs. Once funded, the project is carefully tracked to ensure that it proceeds according to plan. This is a predictive approach to governance, not an agile one. It assumes that plans should be defined in advance. Change is carefully controlled, and success is defined as meeting the plan. Management needs roadmaps that include detailed plans, cost estimates, and completion progress. The Agile approach is product-based governance. It involves allocating an ongoing business-as-usual budget and estimating the value the team will produce over time. The product is funded if the ongoing value sufficiently exceeds the ongoing costs. Once funded, the product's value and costs are carefully monitored to ensure it's achieving desired return on investment, independent of the actual features delivered. When the value is different than estimated, costs and plans are adjusted accordingly. This is an adaptive approach to governance. It assumes that the team will seek out information and new opportunities, then change its plan to take advantage of what they learned. Success is defined in terms of business results, such as return on investment. Management needs roadmaps that include spending, value metrics such as revenue, and a business model. Although Agile is adaptive, not predictive, many Agile teams are subject to project-based governance. Your roadmaps need to accommodate this reality. I provided 4 options from maximally adaptive to maximally predictive. Choose the lower numbered option you can get away with. In some cases, you'll have multiple roadmaps, such as one for management oversight and one for sales and marketing. You can present your team's roadmap in whatever format you like and to any level of detail. For internal roadmaps, a small slide deck, an email, or a wiki page are all common choices. For externally shared roadmaps, a glossy, less detailed web page or marketing video are common. So that is roadmaps from the Art of Agile Development, the introduction to it. And today we're going to be talking about forecasting and roadmaps. Forecasting in particular is of value for those companies that want to know exactly what's going to happen and when, although there are other forms of forecasting as well, which you may have seen if you read the excerpt. Let's go ahead and get started with our first prompt. And Todd, I'll direct this one at you to get us started. Forecasting and roadmaps, something that a lot of teams struggle with. Love them or hate them, it's something that a lot of teams need as well. So I'd love to hear from you just a story of when they've gone particularly well or particularly poorly.
Well, the fun one is when they've gone particularly poorly. That's always the interesting one. And I think it's an interesting challenge. I mean, my background is in product development. Actually, come in from my original background is chemical petroleum engineering, and I was developing software for oil and gas forecasting. So actually, really understand, that's what got me into the forecasting space, was understanding. That's what I look at, and sort of gotten me in the agile space. It's all about feedback loops is what we do. So dealing with uncertainty, dealing with feedback loops, the only way to control uncertainty is through feedback loops. And so you get a sense of we're in fact writing software for managing uncertainty. But the interesting thing is that even though we had experts in knowing how to manage uncertainty, many of our executives still wanted to have things very predictable. It just sort of came. They weren't comfortable with uncertainty in that field. They may have been experts of that in other fields, but when it came to software, they thought, that ought to be very predictable. It's just bits and bytes, right? So it should be very predictable. So we got, and I posted this in the Discord, the fun experiments we had, where during the time I wrote the paper on I was looking at our data, and the important thing is actually in my conclusion of it, which was our focus should have really been on the value. We had customers that just loved our product. They lived in our product all day long. And so they loved it. We had great customer satisfaction scores. We had great acceptance. People they just loved our product, but we had this feeling that we weren't delivering on time. We were making our predictability was really poor. So we had a situation where we said, okay, we're going to fix that. So we had someone come in and said, every month, we're going to have a calendar of innovation. We're going to show that we're innovative, and we're going to deliver some innovation on time every month. And it shifted the dynamic of the organization to what did they do? Like they told you that's what you got to do. That's what everyone did. We focused on delivering at a fixed date and with whatever we had at the time. And it wasn't bad. It was actually the problem with it was that it didn't completely solve the problems the complex problems that our customers had. They loved us when we were late, but delivered what they wanted. And when we started delivering on time regularly, they called it crap on time, right? Because it didn't solve their problem. It wasn't bad. It just didn't solve their problem completely. It was partial solutions. It wasn't poor quality per se. Although, that was one of our concerns, the challenges we had was with quality, but it wasn't necessarily poor quality. It didn't completely solve their problem. And so it wasn't usable. It didn't have the functionality or usability that they needed in order to solve these complex problems. So they stayed with, what they had. And so our customers that loved us now started calling us, calling different names. So that's a case where our challenges of trying to be far more predictable actually worked against us, right? We weren't solving the business problem. We weren't, and so we weren't utilizing the proper feedback that says we're both satisfied at the same time, right? Effectively, we had a closed loop where we said we're going to fix one thing, and I'm not going to respond. We're not going to allow that to change based on the feedback that we get along the way. So that's a case where challenges went particularly poorly, whereas before, when we weren't all that predictable, what we were predictable about was delivering results our customers loved.
Yeah. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing it. What about the rest of you? Do you have a story about a time when estimating and forecasting went particularly well or particularly poorly? As Todd says, a lot of the fun stories are about when it goes particularly poorly. Just raise your hand in Zoom. I'd love to hear from you. So I have to ask Todd, this is a session on forecasting and roadmaps. I asked you to come in because we've got this, you have a lot of expertise in forecasting. Sounds like what you're saying is that we shouldn't forecast. Is that true?
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with forecasting. I think forecasting is a good thing. It's a good thing to forecast and have an idea of where things are going. Where it gets into trouble is when the forecast becomes a plan or a fixed in stone marker, right? And the process of doing that breaks the feedback loop. So the thing is, what you want to be doing agility is all about adjusting to the unknown and to the discovery of new information. And if you do anything, if you fix the scope, it means you know everything that the customer wants in advance. That's never true. If you fix the date, you knew exactly when you're going to be able to deliver what they need. What you really wanted to do is have this dance of feedback where you're getting the right feedback. Either it's a sampling problem, right? Because if you're in a consumer space, you're getting your ability to get feedback might be different. Now, if you're in instant delivery and continuous delivery, you can get type of feedback through A/B testing and things like that. And we were in a bulk product space in older times where we were had probably somewhere between 6 to 18 month cycles. And over that time, then you've got to figure out, how do I get the feedback I need over that long period of time? But it's really all about getting that feedback and steering properly towards the end goal, not to the goal you think you have in the beginning. Either way of fixing things, right? But the forecasting itself is still useful. You still got to make business decisions. The business decision says, is this something we really want to do or not? And that's based on some degree of forecasting, both of value and cost, but it doesn't have to be at detailed level, right? It has to be enough to make a valid decision, and then to move on and then steer that along the way towards the end result. So, but I think where we get caught up is thinking that we can improve that by making a lot of micro forecasts, and I think the micro forecast is where we get into trouble because we believe in those micro forecasts too heavily.
I love that focus on feedback that you keep coming back to, because that's something that, as I've been doing this series, it's come up time and time again. And it's something that I'm coming to particularly realize is those feedback loops. Those are really at the heart of what Agile is all about. And if we can make those higher quality and more rapid and better feedback, the better we do. Absolutely.
I look at it as looking for where the feedbacks are broken, where are the loops broken. Right? Yeah. Are they broken because we've established something is untouchable, like a fixed date or like a fixed goal or something in particular, and we're not willing to listen to feedback? And if we get it, we're not willing to do anything about it. And it's only a feedback loop if you actually take action.
Right.
Feedback, if you have something. Lots of people will hold retrospectives, and they'll talk to a lot of people. I had the retrospective. Had great fun, right? And then I heard one guy who was really passionate about them. He said, I just stopped doing them because they were the same results every single time. No one was ever taking any action. So it's feedback, the retrospective is feedback, but it's not a loop until you actually take action. You take some active leadership to do something about it. That's what closes the feedback loop. Yeah. And that's the key.
Scott has a comment. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks. You can hear me?
Yeah.
I'll give one of my stories, and then I'm going to use that as an excuse to squeeze in a couple of questions if I can.
Sure.
Story. Yeah. So I was a development manager and also a program manager at the same time for a big project for the company that I worked from. We were completely replacing like a 20-year-old application. And we did some analysis on that, seeing if we could improve it, and basically decided, no, we're going to throw that away. We're going to start greenfield, do this all over again. It was like a $16 or $17 million project, which was big for this, all software. And because of, I think, the way we were not an agile organization, our software development teams were, the organization was not. And so this is going to take like 4 years before we actually plump something out to our customers and then they could start using it. It had 5 or 6 different modules. So theoretically, we could have maybe released a module at a time. But our product manager and our customers weren't really comfortable with that. But anyways, the story is about 9 months into it. Simply at the pace in which we were burning down our backlog, it was clear that we were about a year off, somewhere in the $4 million range. And so I had to give, because it was a big enough project, it was the biggest project in the organization, I had to give executive updates on a monthly basis. And I finally determined we were that far off. The response from the CEO and the executives was, there's no way you could have that information only 9 years into what you're predicting is a 4-year effort. Go away. And collect some more data and then come back and tell me the real answer. And so we did do a lot of analysis. We knew where we had gone wrong. We had a lot of new technologies and tools and stuff that we didn't take into account. So I kept going back month after month. And finally, after repeating the same thing for about 6 months, he finally said, okay, fine, I believe you. Yeah, you guys are about a year off. and then went through the process of, do we fund the next year or do we cancel the whole project? In the end, we got the funding. The company didn't have a choice, but it was very, very painful.
It's that is a great story. I've had a very similar experience of this reaction of disbelief and go get the right answer. And what was interesting to me about that is that the time we spent on getting the right answer was wasted time. Like that was not a good use of our time.
Yeah. Two questions, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Based on your excerpt, the project-based versus product-based, I've always been a little bit confused about that. I mean, I understand the funding model, but at an organizational level, you still have to budget annually, right, at that level. So aren't you really just setting dollars aside in both scenarios that are the same? Like we're going to fund this product for, say, the year, or we're going to fund a bunch of projects related to that product for the year. You're kind of not committing them, but aren't you still just kind of setting the same dollars on the side? So is the result similar?
I think
I'm a little confused about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Todd. I don't know if this is an area that you have a lot of experience with, but if you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, we were a product company, and so strangely enough, at one time we thought, oh, we should be funding projects, not products, right? This is really brilliant that we came up with that, and we tried something of that sort, and we realized how terrible an idea it would be, right? In fact, we came up with budgets based on that, and realized, no, that's going to be totally messed up because this product never goes away, right? Even though the project that it's working on completes, and then we go into the next release. And so we realized that really products, because we were in products that were living long lives. I mean, these were 10, 20, 30-year products, right? Yeah. So they had long lives. So we were basically funding products and then again, going back to feedback. We had feedback loops as to what the value was, right? Now, it was a lagging indicator. So we had revenue numbers based on what it was producing in its prior year, but it gave us a pretty good indication that based on that amount, that's how we're willing to fund our products. And you have that feedback loop in a product company. That's where I see the biggest difference between internal IT funding and product companies is that feedback loop is really key. You may or may not have that, and oftentimes what happens, not only is it not there, but fences are put up in order to make sure there is no feedback loop, right? They're so separated from the business that the feedback loop disappears. And they each operate independently, and it becomes a really complicated mess. Now, it can be done. It can be done internally where you have the feedback loops and you can find the value streams and fund them like products. And I think when you do, it's very helpful. But I think where we got to, I think, is where we devolved into, we can treat these things as discrete units, fund them, and then move on to some other discrete unit. And the life of software is longer than a project. I mean, they live on. And so it's a matter of how you think about it. You are right in the sense that it's just a matter of how you shuffle money around, but it's element of thinking about it, and also thinking about longevity of the teams that work on that as well is to keep the continuity.
Yeah. So great segue. And you may have answered my second question, which was, I've always struggled with how do companies measure value fast enough to make financing decisions. If you're funding a product and it's right, maybe it's for the whole year, but maybe you say, you know what, we'll give you 6 months of funding. How do you get feedback fast enough to say, yep, you've delivered value in the first half of the year. We're going to fund you for the second half, as opposed to something else that's really important. And maybe we just admit that there's just no way to do that quickly, right? Maybe it's based on annual revenue, for example.
Yeah, well, I think that gets into sort of the build trap. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm going to build this thing, and the only way I'm going to get feedback is by having it completed, and then I'll get the feedback. And that's a very lagging indicator on getting feedback and value indications. I think I'm a big fan of product discovery, things like the lean startup, where you incrementally discover information. And that incremental discovery of information tells you a lot about.
We've lost Todd for a moment.
Something that's viable for the business. Is it something that customers will buy? Is it something that they're excited about? Are we getting the right things? So that's something that's internal. It's still trying to figure out, are we going to realize the benefits that we thought? I mean, How are we going to get that? And so it's a matter of, to me, it's a matter of finding faster feedback mechanisms that don't involve complete product delivery, because product delivery is expensive. So the simpler you can make it and get that feedback, but it's going to be incomplete information. And but there's a whole business of understanding how to make decisions with imperfect information. Yeah. And which is what we do all the time. It's just, you can improve the perfection of that data, of that information, through simpler techniques, right? They get you a little bit faster feedback.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Those are great questions, Scott. Thank you for bringing them up. I want to just chime in here a little bit and sort of build on what Todd was saying about this being a mindset. In that, that you're still allocating money, and it's certainly, it's enough money to run the team. But in a project-based mindset, you're saying this is what we're going to get and when, and we're successful if we get that. In a product-based mindset, it's really about product management. Product management is about understanding what the value we're going to get out of this product is, and how are we going to know we're going to get that value. And having those things, as Todd was saying, not necessarily directly in terms of revenue, but having indicators that you can check as you go to say, we're on the right track or we're not. Again, to join the conversation, raise your hand in Zoom. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, Todd. I think just to take a little fanboy moment, I'm not sure if you recall, we met 10 years ago in Malmo, and you gave this talk on the tornado of uncertainty, where there was like the large amount of stuff. You said, I'm from oil and gas, and we get tornadoes in the South America, and like all of this stuff goes down. And then you said a thing, like at the bottom is the part of actually drilling. And as in software, that costs about 1 to 4 times as much. And that, I've kept that phrase with me forever. Like this wise person who I met there said, it costs 1 to 4 times as much. And that's okay, because the variability at the top is so much bigger, right? So firstly, thanks and well done. An amazing talk there that stuck in my head for 10 years. I've never managed to find the slide again, though, but it's okay. It's in my mind. And that's a segue into a story of where estimation has gone wrong and been completely right in the last 2 weeks for us. So we're using test cards, like a strategizer test card in one engagement I'm working with at the moment, to try to get out of this build trap. And one of the founders of this company said, look, there's this piece of code I wrote all these months ago, and we've been waiting ages to get things done, and we've been talking about this thing for 3 years. A whole lot of things came together. But then he said, like his estimate was, give me overnight and I'll get it working by tomorrow. Right? So we said, let's write a test card around it. And we had a shipping date of tomorrow. And guess what? It didn't take tomorrow. It shipped on Friday. But that didn't matter, because the test card says we hope we'll get at least 20 bookings by doing this within a week. And we got 160 bookings by doing it. So I really like the focus on value, because no one cares that he took 5 times as long to do it. Because the test card says we're going to put this live. We believe that we're going to measure the number of bookings, and we believe that we'll get 20, and that's we'll be right if we get 20. And we got a lot more than that, and so it completely didn't matter how long it took, and it was a small enough iteration. So it was just really interesting. Like the estimate was wrong, and no one has even really highlighted that, except I've kept bringing our attention back to it as a group to say, it doesn't matter, and everybody keeps saying, like, how do we know how long it's going to take? It really does matter if our steps are 2 months long. Then we're screwed, right? Because if we're 4x wrong on a 2-month step, but if we really want to make a 2-month estimate, what are we doing? So anyway, I just wanted to share that story, and also my little fun moment. Thanks, I don't know if you still have that diagram, Todd, somewhere.
Oh, I keep using it. Yeah, that's the one where it's I tell the story of the Wizard of Oz, the Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and going through the tornado. Yeah, I've been using it for almost 20 years now. It's terrible. It works. It still works, and it even works internationally. At first, I thought it was only going to work in the U.S., but everyone knows the Wizard of Oz. They love this. But no, that's a great story. In fact, actually, listening to it, there were 2 estimates, right? There was the estimate of how long it was going to take, and there was the estimate of the value, and both were off by a factor of either 5 or in the case of value was off by 8. And that's the reality, is that we're making gut level decisions, and we're trying to figure out, it doesn't really matter as long as we are able to make those safely. And if we have enough wins, the value component of this is so high that many times that you can have a few that take a little bit longer, but the value is the key element. Microsoft Windward is a great example. Right? People point to it as an example of a failed software delivery project because it took 5 years when they claimed it was only going to take 1 year. But Windward went in, and they probably did that thinking, if we don't do this, WordPerfect is going to continue to dominate the market space. But they came out with the product that actually did what it needed to, which was deliver functionality that WordPerfect could not deliver. And they took away a 50% market share from WordPerfect and became, Word is now the dominant, by far, word processing tool. And that was five times later than they thought it was going to be. So the value is enormous in that case.
So I want to ask you, Todd, because we're talking about take small bets, evaluate your based on value, make steady progress, close the feedback loops. But a lot of people are living in organizations that's just not true. They've got executives, they've got managers who really are only willing to think in terms of a predictive model. Tell me what you're going to get done. If you don't get done what you say you're going to get done, then things have failed. What do you do in that situation?
It really comes down to what degree of trust you have, right? And then based on that trust, the way I look at it also is if I'm starting in an environment that has low trust, I want to do everything I can to build that trust. And so what that means is if their expectation is high predictability, then I need to start with delivering at a higher predictability. The Kanban way of doing that is to get really good at collecting data. Not so much getting good at estimating, but getting good at collecting data, because collecting data tells you how are we performing? How is the system actually performing? What is our lead time? When something comes into the queue, how long does it take to get out? If I have that data, I can improve my predictability. And if I have an understanding of what the distribution of that data is, I can also look at the system and say, what is the system doing that's making that distribution poor? Do I have a very low flow efficiency? Do I need to be improving my handoffs? Do I have too many handoffs? Do I have unnecessary handoffs? Usually the problem is I have too much work in progress. 90% of the time, the problem is the schedules are so ridiculous. The only answer is to throw more at it. And by throwing more at it, it actually clogs up the system even more, becomes overburdened, and then nothing comes out. So these are a combination of common problems we see. Usually just reducing the work in progress down, cutting the work in progress down can have enormous values. We know from Little's Law, you get it just because of the relationship between throughput, work in progress, and lead time. But there's an extra benefit because reducing work in progress also reduces multitasking, and the multitasking overhead is just enormous. So we frequently get significant improvements in throughput just because of that, getting a better flow through the system. So understanding the system, understanding where the barriers are, where the delays are coming from, getting to predictability is a valid thing if that's where you're at. Now, if you're in an environment where you're really trying, I look at it in a startup environment, you're usually not worried about predictability. You're worried, like David said, can I get more results? And it really doesn't necessarily matter how long it takes because I've got such good feedback loops that tell me, am I getting results from my increase in revenue from either bookings or sales or whatever. So it's understanding the environment you're in, learning how to play the game of that environment, and then using micro changes within that to shift the environment to your favor, right? However you can. I've had some success with doing that and nibbling away to try to improving the relationship, the feedback with the stakeholders that are causing the unexpected, having expectations that are unrealistic.
And we talked about stakeholder trust just a couple of weeks ago. So for those of you who didn't see that session, the recording is up at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 book club. And a lot of the conversation reflected what Todd's saying now. Although a surprise from that was that, at least for the people in that discussion, the consensus seemed to be that it's more about delivering frequently and just having this track record of delivery rather than delivering on time necessarily. Just keep on delivering a lot, and that will make a big difference.
I think both are correct, right? I think the shorter you can make your feedback loops, the better. And to the extent they say, I see results and you're giving me more or less what I'm expecting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was another big part of the conversation. Let me segue a little bit. And again, love everybody else's participation. To participate, just raise your hand in Zoom. Let's talk about what has happened when your forecast hasn't met your stakeholder expectations. So you've made a forecast. You're discovering you're wrong. We heard from Scott about that. What do you do in that circumstance? Have you been in that situation, Todd?
So I was in a situation where I came into an organization where they were already 5 years late. So it was an interesting challenge because what I tried to do is get them on track as quickly as I could. And it was actually, we got out. We actually did end up delivering basically. So I went into it, and first I saw what I was seeing happening was they were projecting that they were going to be out in a year. But this was based on some velocity projections that they were doing. And so, at least they had some information. They were using historical data. What they had been forgetting to include in their forecasting was the scope creep that they were continuing to see. And so I had them adjust that based on their scope creep and said, look, you might be working off 25 points, but you're adding 10 each time. So you're really only getting 15. You're not getting 25. And the history you've got is your scope is increasing 10 every time. It's pretty consistent. You got some linearity here. You need to be adjusting that. And so we made that adjustment. And actually, based on that, came out pretty good to concluding it on time. And but I think what had happened was, even though we were able to get it out, we more or less met the target that we had. It was maybe a month or so late out of this when it was already 5 years late. But I think the level of frustration at certain people was so high that what they wanted some action. They wanted me to replace the manager on the team. And it had nothing, and it turns out the manager was not the problem in any way. He was actually keeping it going. And I wouldn't do it. There was then a reorganization, and in the process of the reorganization, I ended up getting pushed off to the side because I didn't create the relationship with the right people. I was working very closely with the people doing the work and working, and had a good relationship with the essentially the business owner, but his boss just was so mad at this other guy for 5 years of being delayed. Right? And it wasn't the problem wasn't that they were taking longer than they should have. The problem was the initial estimate was just stupid. It was made by someone who was just bragging and had no stake in the game. They just said, I can do this in a year, and then hand it off. And so that was a case where it was a challenge to begin with. For me, it was a challenge because it's just politics at that point. Right, and playing the right politics game, and I was unwilling to play the game they wanted me to play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you're talking about forecasting and roadmaps at the long term, rather than just sort of the short term, we're delivering to our stakeholders every couple of weeks. You do tend to get into a lot of these political games, and it's not always functional, is it? It's more about perception and egos that sometimes than reality.
Yeah. It was totally about. It was about. I just want it this way, right? I know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, what are your preferred approaches for sharing this information with with managers? Sharing the roadmaps. We've got managers, we've got stakeholders, we've got customers. What about tools like Jira? How do those fit into it?
So, I usually am very careful with how to share things. The level of transparency. I think we all talk about transparency being a great thing in the Agile space, and it can be. It all comes back to trust, right? And so you can only be as transparent as the trust allows. And so if you've got a high trust environment, you can share almost everything. If you've got a relatively low trust environment, then you have to be selective about what you make available and to highlight what you make available. And so and we have to realize that while we might have gotten really good at understanding that we're dealing with a world of uncertainty. The general world doesn't work that way. The general world likes to have everything in discrete components, very predictable, very much tell me something and I can go to it. So what we have to do is be very careful about how we communicate uncertainty carefully, right? Mm-hmm. The approach the simplest and most effective approach I found for roadmap forecasting, for really laying out, product deliverability. I have set out, or I wrote a blog on many years ago called the ABCs of software development, where I basically say, I'm only going to allocate at most 50% of my forecasted schedule to features that I'm going to commit to, right? Over whatever period that is, because I know that it's going to be, even if I'm really good at estimating, I've probably got about 50%, I've got 100% uncertainty in in how long something might take. So, and in aggregate, it'll come out okay if I get really good at it. If I'm not very good at it, I need to even go less than that. But that way I say, I'm going to hold back on what I commit. I'm going to hold a whole bunch of things that I'm going to have ready to sort of take up, and things that I know of in my roadmap that I might pick up. But I'm going to focus on what I absolutely have to have, schedule it so that no more than 50% of the schedule is that way. So I'm doing some degree of high-level forecast, right? High-level estimation. But I'm not necessarily doing detailed estimation. I'm just sort of saying this is about what it looks like. And then I'll have B and C type features that are lower priority, less on. And what will end up happening is I'll discover something during the delivery. And this is when, remember, this is sort of when working on product deliveries that were 6 to 18 months. Over that time, we're going to discover new things. Now, if I'm able to get to a mode where I'm doing much more continuous delivery, different approaches can be used. But then in that case, your forecasting is a little bit different because you're not making long-term forecasts. You're making really relatively short-term forecasts. Or maybe high-level business goals. Like in 6 months, we'd like to have these types of things available, these capabilities. So it's a matter of understanding your business, understanding where the uncertainty in the business is, and then getting really good at that type of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I were to sum up what you've been saying here is that if we've got a high trust environment, then we can work with really good feedback loops. And it's not so much about the forecast. It's about understanding the value and conducting experiments around that value, sort of in the way David was talking about. And if you can get 8 times value than you were expecting, then you're on a good track.
Absolutely great. Yeah.
But if you're not in that situation, and a lot of companies that I visit are not in that situation, then you have to work on establishing trust. And one way to do that is, one way is to deliver frequently. And another way is to be paying attention to where the uncertainty is and making forecasts and being aware of the politics of your organization and addressing that.
Exactly. And I think it's an element of understanding expectations and then fulfilling on those expectations, whatever that may be. So I think frequent delivery is one good way to do it because it chops it up into chunks. It shows that, hey, this team's actually getting stuff done. It provides some visibility to something that's otherwise a black box. Right? So if everyone goes dark and does a lot of work for 6 months, but nothing surfaces that's visible. Even if you have product demos on the way, you're not getting quite the same thing as really tangible short-term. These are things that we're doing. So product demos do help a little bit with that, but the more frequent you can get it, the more frequent you can get it in hands of real customers too, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. We are just about out of time, but David has a comment. I hope it's a quick one. David, go ahead.
I will try to make it quick. It's very quick. It goes like this. I've had one advantage. I ran a business for a very long time whose main model was contracting software development. And I've got one weakness, which my wife likes very much, and that's I cannot lie. I'm an actor. I can act on stage, but I can't lie. I can't bring in myself to do it, which means that I can look someone in the face and say, I can't tell you. I won't lie to them. And once we realize that it would be lying, it's been really easy to say, let's talk about what we can know and not what we can't. You referenced the build trap earlier, and in there, I think there's that model of strategic gaps. There's things we want to know that we actually don't know, and so we just try to force knowledge and then somehow lie to ourselves, and that's where it goes wrong. So it's really interesting about knowing what we can know in estimating and forecasting. my comment there.
Thank you,
Great
David. I
comment.
appreciate that. Oops, sorry, Todd. Let me unmute you again.
Yeah, I unmuted. Okay, yeah, that's good. No, that's a great comment, Dave. Yeah, I think it was back in the early days of XP. Uncle Bob would always say, "We're being asked to lie all the time, right? And we can't." And because estimates, and so what I think the key is let's realize that we're not lying. We don't know how long things are going to take. It's a reality. What we do know, and we might have gut feels about all these things, and that's fine. But we're making decisions under uncertainty. And the reality is, let's go find out. All right, and how risky is it for us to find out? Right? If it's a short-term thing, it doesn't take long. We can learn something. How quickly can we learn what we don't know? And I think that's what we're really trying to do.
That's fantastic. And that is the time we have. If you're interested in some of the specific techniques for forecasting estimating, some of which are based on Todd's work in his writings, that is available in the Art of Agile Development. You can find information on that at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone, if you want to contact me, certainly feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, ask any questions. Happy to connect and answer any questions or learn from you, right? That's great.
And Todd, I think you are on the Discord as well, right?
Yes, I'm on the Discord as well, yeah.
Yeah, the Discord is at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 Discord. Todd, thank you once again. Todd is Chairman of Kanban University and past member of the Agile Alliance Board of Directors. Next week, we are discussing Agile management. This is an important topic, and I'm happy to say that we have two fantastic guests joining us for the session. We have Johanna Rothman, who's a well-known management consultant and author, and Elizabeth Hendrickson, who's an experienced technology executive. That's going to be on June 10th at 8 a.m. Pacific. Free reading is up at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 book club, and you can join the Discord conversation by, again, visiting jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 Discord. That is it for today. Thank you for joining us, Todd. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and participation. And I will see you next week.